Hey, so you're sitting at the table with your two friends, two brothers, Jacob and Esau. I don't think I've ever had a friend or have known of anybody named Esau. But let's just imagine you're having dinner, a family dinner at their house, and during an interlude, the dad just makes a statement. Hey, Jacob I loved, and Esau I hate. There would be a definite pause in the conversation. I think it would be very awkward. There'd be tension. There'd be sadness. I know I personally wouldn't be able to spend much time within that family's household. It would be very challenging. And needless to say, there's a point in the story of God where this phrase is found in the scriptures. And there's a quote, Jacob I loved and Esau I hated. And it's not a quote from a person, from a physical dad here on earth, but it's from God. And I want to walk through this a little bit because it definitely can affect us, but we need to understand that context absolutely matters in everything. And so in this very short video, I just want to provide a bit of context that frames this story. I think it's important for us to spend time thinking about the implications of biblical narratives that we can tend to accept at face value, that sometimes need refinement. Otherwise, subconsciously, they may take us to weird spaces in thinking about our relationship with God. For example, for some who've experienced sibling and parental dysfunction, this phraseology that we just see with hating one and loving the other, it may really bring back bad memories, especially if you felt that you were the one often overlooked or not valued in comparison to your brother or sister. The Jacob-Esau story, it's found in Genesis 25, and it begins with God stating that the older will serve the younger. So Jacob and Esau, they were born during the Bronze Age, somewhere between 2100 and 1800 BCE. The next reference of this sibling difference is found in Malachi. And in Malachi, chapter 1, Malachi prophesied in about the 5th century BCE, which is really important regarding the historical context of this quote. Finally, we see Paul in Romans chapters 9 through 11 quoting the Genesis 25 passage, the older shall serve the younger. And so what I want to do today is just present a compilation of my own reading initially, but also supplemented by other Jewish and Christian scholars that really have teased out some dynamics that are well beyond my pay grade. So let's jump into this. First, I think it's important to frame the Esau-God relationship prior to looking at the word choices that may give us pause. Nowhere in the text does it indicate that there was a lack of love. So when you read through this, there's nowhere in the text of looking at Esau as he existed on this earth that there was a lack of connection with God or a lack of love. Especially, there's no hate ever seen within that relationship between God and Esau. Dr. Eli Lazorkin Eisenberg has pointed out that God blessed Esau greatly, even after Esau had devalued the covenantal promises that deemed appropriate for the firstborn, which we find in Genesis 33. Another scholar, Friar Stephen DeYoung, mentioned that Esau was granted land around Mount Seir, and this part of the land was originally promised to Abraham. In Deuteronomy 2, God warned that the Israelites were warned not to attack the sons of Esau, or they would risk the withdrawal of his protection. So just on circumspect, we see God's actions toward Esau as caring and protective. God never disappears. Esau never disappears from God's presence, and nor do his descendants. So, let's take a brief look at the context of these passages that may have caused issue for us. First, in the Genesis 25 passage regarding that the older would serve the younger, we see that it's when you read that, it's framed as nations represented by these two individuals. Jacob would eventually represent Israel, and Esau, the nation of Edom. The Malachi passage, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated, is really contextualized in the framework of a reformed Judea under Persian rule and the nation Edom. Here Malachi is announcing judgment on Edom for the nation's sins and apostasy from true worship. This is parallel to the judgment of the exile that was imposed on the Israelites. Finally in Romans, Paul speaks of the Esau-Jacob story really in terms of role reversal of the normal order of things, when he quotes that the older shall serve the younger. And the story in Romans is framed within the issues that were addressed to the church at Rome that was dealing with this big issue of the merging of the Jewish and Gentile Christians together into kind of one unified community. So, a little backdrop, the church in Rome had been affected by two major expulsions of Jews under Claudius and Tiberius. Gentile Christians predominated during these expulsions. Eventually, though, the Jewish Christians returned to Rome when things mellowed and were reintegrated into this framework. So when Paul speaks in this letter to this group, we see him addressing these issues. And without getting into the weeds, I've included a link from De Young's work on this topic. In short, the Israel of God, in looking at from Romans' perspective, the Israel of God, or those from Jacob, includes the Jewish and Gentile contingent that had responded to Christ, and the unbelieving Jewish community as those who are represented by Esau. So finally, one last thought on the Jewish root of the word hate that's found in the Malachi passage. Douglas Hershey points out that the Hebrew language, when it began, it was more of a pictorial script. Simply that the shape of the letters elicited pictures to the reader. The pictorial script, when you look, the pictorial script for the Hebrew root for the word for hate is SANE. And it was created from these letters that, when you looked at the pictures, referred to as thorns or seeds. So this imagery, this imagery has shifted the Western meaning of the word hate from enmity between two people, really to avoidance or the avoidance of pain. In ancient times, thorns were used to construct fences, create shields, create weapons, providing a hedge for protection. So if we look at it this way, the Hebrew view of hate was more about being hurt or wounded by something. In other words, hate had the meaning of distancing oneself from the source of pain. And you can see this in a few examples in the Torah, where Abraham's response to Abimelech's hate of him was noticing the distancing and the separation that Abimelech expected between the two of them. And you can find this in Genesis 26. In another example, the Lord noticed that Leah was hated by Jacob when he states, and when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb. There was nothing in Jacob's actions, however, that could be viewed as hate. However, in the construct of distancing oneself, we see that Jacob was more attracted to Rachel. So in view of that, there was an avoidance. There was an avoidance of Leah. So now to the Malachi passage. You can see a definite distancing of God from Esau with respect to the covenant. Esau had rejected his birthright really over a bowl of soup. And so What interests me regarding this view of hate as an avoidance of pain, the reference back, when I look back to Jesus' words, when he uses the word hate, I think, just quickly, hate your father, mother, sister, brothers. We've always looked at that as love less. And just to take the sting out of it and understand that Jesus would never talk about enmity between those individuals, because there was so much in the scriptures regarding loving your family. However, when we now look at those words in the ancient context of avoidance, it might shift our understanding of the narrative. And I just wanted to throw that out as a thought. And thanks for listening. Take care.